Students, families, and workers. Tonight, we will be discussing two topics: printed contracts with extra pay for extra duties and paid bereavement leave. We will also revisit topics of protecting our students and families from ICE and bullying and classified pay from the October session. Our meeting confer team will present our proposals and figure out how and when we are going to move forward on them. Hopefully, admins will be ready to have a meaningful, productive, and collaborative session tonight. What to look out for during the session tonight. Be on the lookout for the following tactics and write down some examples for the debrief. Delay, deny, divide, deflect, disrupt, discourage, discredit, demand, derail. Be on the lookout, write down some examples. Here are some norms for tonight in order to make this go smoothly. Keep side conversations to a bare minimum. Silence your cell phones. I feel like I'm at the movies. As hard as it can be, do not react audibly. Use your green and red cards. Green if you agree with something that's being said. Red if you disagree. Please only put up one at a time. Don't do the double-sided version of it. It gets confusing. Here's what you can do as part of the audience tonight. First of all, you being here shows tremendous support for our meet and confer team. Our team has worked extremely hard to prepare for this. So your support means a lot. The district won't say yes to any of our proposals unless they see public school workers and their allies in the room. So again, thank you so much for being here and showing up. Watch, listen, and take notes. What do you hear? What do you see? What do you notice? Give your colleagues, friends, and community allies some live updates. Use your text threads, group chats, etc. And share the DAE YouTube page with your friends. The meeting will be live streamed. Search for DAE on YouTube, you will find it. Once the session is over, we are going to have a collective debrief with our meet and confer team. I would encourage everybody to please stay and participate in the debrief. It would be helpful for you to bring your observations. The team up here has a hard time because they're really focusing on their responsibilities for tonight. After the negotiations, yeah, give it up. After the session is over at 8, we ask everybody to, if possible, please help reset the room and stay for the debrief. Our meet and confer team will join us for the debrief after the session is over. And with all that, we'll get started. I was coming to you, sir.
Test one. All right, good evening, everybody. I heard like 4 people. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. All right, thank you all so much for attending our November meeting Confer committee meeting. Our agenda for this evening, and just for the sake of the meeting Confer committee and those that are in attendance, if you go to our Durham Public Schools website, under the Board of Education tab, and scroll down, there's a button that says meeting Confer committee meetings and materials, I believe. That's where we house all of the meeting materials, agendas, minutes per meeting. So you will find those items in there. Really quick, it's after 6:01, we're getting started. We'll quick rundown of the agenda, and then we'll definitely jump in. The first item is intro, minutes approval, meeting Confer purpose and review, ICE review and revisit, bereavement leave, contracts, extra duty pay, salary administration policy implementation, classified pay follow-up, and then we will have a closing. And I know that there were some slides, here we go, in terms of the first item, the meeting Confer purpose review. So DAE had some statements up there, so I'll turn it over to you all too, because you have someone on your team that want to go over that, and then I'll make some comments as well.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Christy Patterson. I am an EC Special Programs teacher at Carrington Middle, and I am honored to serve as the Durham Association of Educators Vice President. Please, if you need to address me, you may address me as Ms. Patterson. I am sitting in for our wonderful president, President Michael Tweetmeyer, who unfortunately could not be here today due to a family emergency. So I ask, as we move forward, that you please keep her and her family lifted in prayer. Before we get started, I want to give some reminders for all speakers to support our interpretation team. Always speak clearly into the mic. Slow your speech down. State the entire acronym the first time. For example, DAE should be said Durham Association of Educators first. Thereafter, you may say DAE. Now for approval of the October 16 minutes. We have reviewed the minutes from Principal Taylor for the October 16th meeting Confer session, and we approved those minutes. Materials in this session, as Dr. Lewis so eloquently said, are publicly on the Durham Public Schools website. Go to the site, go to the Board of Education page, and then click Meet and Confer Materials box at the bottom of the page so you can refer to the slides there if you would like. Also, we have the slides translated into Spanish and printed copies of the Spanish slides available in the back room. I will now pass it to Swain to ground us in our purpose for here tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Patterson. And before we get into the content, we have a lot on the agenda, but we want to just go back and remind everybody about the purpose of this space, Meet and Confer. And you can see on the slide an excerpt from Policy 7215. We're really excited about some recent celebrations coming out of Asheville. Our union siblings made some joint policy proposals together with the administration just last week. That's right, raise your green cards for that. And what they were able to put forward as a solution is having remote workday options for both classified and certified staff on optional work days as well as for inclement weather days. So that's the purpose of Meet and Confer. It's a problem-solving space. Employees through the ERO together with administration come together to problem solve and actually address the crises in our schools. And so we hope that today, just to remind everyone, our schools are in crisis. We're here because they're not just problems, but solutions that we're bringing. We've developed these in talking to workers all across the district. So this is not a listening session for feedback. We have been charged by the board to come to the table as equals and make joint policy recommendations. So our expectation is to use the space to move these proposals forward into action. So let's get into it. I'll pass it to Carlos.
Before we get into it, I want to make sure I see Ms. Taylor, because I thought we had talked about last meeting. Ms. Taylor is a note taker, secretary. Are you doing it again, or?
Thank you for that. We actually, I think Ms. Pope is taking notes. We have alternating note takers, but thanks for that clarification.
Thank you.
And I can pass it now to Mr. Perez.
Can we get the next slide? Thank you. So good evening, everybody. My name is Mr. Perez. I work at Jordan High School. We're going to be briefly revisiting some of the proposals we put forward on ICE recently. But before we get into some of the details on that, we wanted to take the opportunity to speak to the obvious urgency of the moment. I think everyone in the room knows that since last spring, DAE has put forward a series of policies and proposals to protect our students from the trauma and terror of the racist mass deportation agenda of the Trump administration. Unfortunately, that trauma and terror has now been brought to our doorstep. And because of that, we're all feeling the urgent need to see these policies and proposals get brought across the finish line. Yesterday, a lot of us throughout the district, our families, our students, our coworkers, were gripped with fear, with confusion, and with contradictory direction, uneven direction from administration. I don't think it's a shock to anyone in this room to hear me say that attendance is down, anxiety is running incredibly high across the district. We need a plan. And to the extent that there already is a plan in place, it's clear to most of us, most of our families, most of our students, most of our coworkers, that we're not clear on what that plan is. And if that lines up with your experience in the audience and you work with DPS, can I see some green cards? So we feel like tonight we have a real opportunity at this table, particularly piggybacking off what Swain just said about what we're here to do, that we have a real opportunity to come together and make sure that these things get moving and get moving fast. So right now, there are two policies that are sitting with the Board of Education. That's the 5120 policy and the private zones policy that we put forward. But unfortunately, neither of these two policies are at the top of the priority list for tomorrow's board meeting, okay? And so, Dr. Lewis, given your authority and given what we know is our shared desire to make sure that we have a safe and secure learning environment for all of our students, we want to ask you to join us in calling on the Board of Education to make sure that those two policies in particular are put at the top of the list to make sure that we have this opportunity to really meet the urgency of the moment.
Thank you. Let me first just acknowledge the heaviness that this week has had on everyone in this Durham community. Obviously our students and our families, but also our educators as well, who's also bearing that weight because you're seeing firsthand, students, you see empty seats in your classrooms. You're hearing from your families about the real life fear. So I just want to acknowledge that, in this space. And I will tell you that I think we have some board members in here. They are keenly aware of the urgency around this. So yes, we definitely agree on any type of increased measures to create even more sense of urgency around this, because when I hear from families that are calling schools and saying, you're just gonna have to do what you need to do because I'm not leaving my house to come pick my kid up, that's real fear. when I walk into a school and a principal sees me break down in tears because of the weight of all of what you all experience in the building, that's real. So make no mistake, let me be clear. Our board, this administration is keenly aware of the urgency. So absolutely, we will continue to communicate. At the end, the board members are in here hearing as well, to communicate the urgency of not only policy, but other procedures that we need to put in place and then maybe enhance to ensure that our students, staff, and families feel safe. And what we hear from our families is, for the most part, they know that their child is safe at school, but it's the going to school and coming from school that more support is needed.
So that's exactly why we're asking for those two policies in particular to call on the board. And I'm hearing you say that you're in agreement that we should be calling on the board to make those two particular policies a top priority for tomorrow's meeting, because in email communication that we received from you, it prior to yesterday was pretty low on the docket, and we want to make sure that it's at the top tomorrow. Would you be in agreement with that?
Obviously, I can be in agreement to move those items at the top because those are,
That's
I
right.
definitely can have those conversations with our board.
Great, thank you. Next slide. So the other two that we wanted to bring relate to policies that we had brought and discussed last time. We were under the impression that there was agreement on making red cards, Know Your Rights cards available across the district. Folks can see at the top what we propose, making those visible, available, every bus stop, front office, student services. And the communication we received in response following the meeting was that those would be made available on demand. And that's where we have concern, and we want to make sure that the district is committed to making sure that these are available to all students. Because if we make it on demand, we know that there's going to be limited availability across the district. And if there's ever a time where folks need to know their rights at a very basic level, it's right now. Will you commit to making sure that these are available across the district, not just on demand, in the same way that we've seen at Jordan High School right here, that Ms. Taylor made available, making sure that there's a clear sign, especially in English and Spanish, that are ready to go right when you walk through the door?
Yeah, and I think we're saying the same thing. Would you consider that on demand?
No, those
I
were
thought you said we'll be committed to making these available like Jordan is doing.
correct across the district, but not waiting for a demand, just to make sure that they're there regardless of whether they're being asked for, that those are provided for across the district.
Yeah, like I said, I think we're saying the same thing. So yes, we're fine with having these at every one of our counters at every school. Is that so? That's the on demand I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we just to get a temperature
And
check?
I want to make sure our principals voice it in this space too. I don't want to do all the talking tonight, but our principals, I want them to make sure that they respond to.
Okay, and just so we have clarity, if folks who work in DPS have seen these at their front office and in student services, can we see some green cards? Okay. I think that's the issue.
Yeah, and they're on the way.
Okay, thank you.
I think the issue is in order for us to be able to not just make a promise, right, to be able to deliver on that promise, we have to be sure that we can source these cards in the numbers necessary.
Sure.
And so, what we'll be happy to share with you all is that we have placed an order for 20,000 of these cards. But we have to wait for them to be produced and sourced, right? And so these cards will be available in all of our locations as soon as they arrive from the printer.
Thank you. Can we move on to the next one? Unless,
I'll just add, Ken Barnes is over there. He's also working with transportation to make those available on demand on our buses too.
thank you. Next up. All right, so similar to this last proposal, we were happy to hear the enrollment letters, that there was agreement on that. I think the concern that we had here, and we've highlighted those concerns, is that what we were calling for is to make those available for all students. And in the email correspondence we received, it's saying, again, upon parent or guardian request. And I think the concern that we have here is an equity concern and the concern for students feeling singled out. in calling for that and just making those available for a subset of students rather than just as a matter of course for students across the board. Given that this is already form letter, ready to go, send it around, make sure it's available to everybody. That's more the concern around this proposal.
So,
That it's sent to everybody, not available to everybody, but actually sent to everybody.
so, I don't think our agreement was that we would send, these letters to everyone. I think what our agreement was and our understanding is that we would make sure there was a system and a process in place, so that these, letters could be, provided to families, who request them. We did not, suggest that we were going to send them, unannounced or unrequested. We certainly don't intend to single anyone out. What in fact we are suggesting and what we are quite comfortable with and have done is make sure that there is a process in place, whereas any family, any student who is interested in having one of these letters provided for them, our school data managers know exactly how to provide them. In fact, they have two options as to how those can be provided to students. There's no singling out, no specific activity of that kind. If you go to your office, go to your school's office and say you would like a enrollment letter, you will receive an enrollment letter.
So yeah, we understand that there was a discrepancy in the understanding from the district and what we were putting forward. That's why we highlighted it on the screen here around making sure that it's available to all students and not upon, but the whole.
It is available to all students. Any student who would
Who requested?
Any student who would like one and ask for one, or any family who requests one, will receive one. No questions asked.
So if folks in the audience know that that's available to them and that it's been communicated to everyone at your school, could you raise your green card?
No, I did not suggest, I was very clear, we have not suggested we have provided them to everyone in school. What we
That's
said,
not what I was asking.
what we have shared, and again, it's not really appropriate to, turn around and ask for audience participation. This is the committee. I would ask you to respect the rules that we've established, that interactions during this process take place within the members of the committee, right? That is our agreement, is it not? That is our agreement, that interactions on this committee take place within the committee members. We are available and have made available enrollment letters and a process for students to receive enrollment letters on demand. As anyone who wants one can simply say that they want one or they need one.
So at least I guess I could say, I haven't seen any communication that that's available to me, to students. I think that's the concern, is that if you don't know that it's there, then it's not there.
That's fair. We can address that.
And I think making sure that, again, the demand is for all students. And that there is a real concern, and I think anxiety that families might have in asking for that, rather than just having it already as a matter of course.
Yeah, I have a problem with mass printing these enrollment verification forms and sending it home with every student. Maybe a student or family that didn't request one, maybe careless and leave it on the ground, and now their address and things are compromised. And so the system we have in place that we will stick to is upon request from the parent or guardian.
Okay. Would an email work if printing is the concern?
I'm sorry?
Would an email version work if printing is the concern?
The system that we have established, this is based on legal advice too, please understand, is that when a family or guardian asks for the enrollment verification form, we will give that to them.
Gotcha. Okay. We're gonna move on to the next one, since you already are clear on our concerns.
Hello, I'm Ms. Truitt, and I'm from Carrington Middle School, social studies teacher for 7th grade. How y'all doing? All right. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, as we know, 1 out of 5 children have experienced bullying from the ages of 12 to 18 years of age. And as we are well aware, Students are getting bullied due to their national origin. They are suffering in silence in many cases. And I have students who have come to me and conveyed how bullying is truly impacting their lives as well as their friends' lives. I would like to just let you know that they are being bullied just because they have a different culture, just because they act differently, just because they come from various countries, and just because they have an accent and they're coming from Afghanistan, Mexico, or Honduras. And many times they are picked on just because of their ethnic origin. It's not only happening in the classroom, but outside the classroom. I want to emphasize that, outside of the classroom. So many incidents take place on the buses, in the hallway when they have their hall passes, in the cafeteria. And when incidents happen, when a trained staff member isn't around, the bullying incident goes unnoticed. Again, when there is no one trained, the bullying incident goes unnoticed. What we're asking is that we include that it is paramount to revisit the proposal on face-to-face anti-bullying training with an emphasis on bullying regarding national origin and immigration status, not only in Safe Schools Online, but in person for all staff, classified staff, as well as certified staff. This is paramount to address this issue. We agreed on the initiative at the end of the school year last year, and I know a lot of things have happened since then, but we are living in a tumultuous time, and we do not want to have what happened last year happen again. I can actually see my students and what they have shown me that's happening around non-certified staff. By the time they get to certified staff, administrators, our colleagues, the counselors, the social workers, they have gone unnoticed because they do not know how to recognize it. We are asking, please, pretty please, we are asking that we make sure that we give this training to all of our staff as soon as possible, because it's just not right.
So with that, Dr. Lewis and your team, just wanted to put it to y'all. We need to have face-to-face, in-person, anti-bullying training with an emphasis on bullying in regards to national origin and ethnicity. That needs to happen at all work sites for all workers. And wanted to ask you guys, where do we stand on implementing that training?
I'll start, I guess, on here from our building principals in terms of what they're doing in their buildings. You see on the screen, obviously there's the required online training. And what we're learning, I'll speak for myself, what I'm learning coming into Durham is that there's, I typically would use a box with a lot of arrows going in one direction and another box with arrows going in the same direction. And so the goal is to have alignment in all that we do. And so what I've noticed coming in, there's a lot of great things going on, but they look like the box with arrows going in different ways. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to align, from a systemic standpoint, and also approach it from the standpoint of, what I would call legacy work in terms of us setting up systems that will outlive all of us, so that when we're all gone, these systems are still in place. And so in addition to the required training, we know that some of our schools engage in beginning of the year bullying, face-to-face beginning of the year bullying training. In addition to that, I know and I often say, all of these bullying prevention month, these other ones can't just be 1 month things to focus on it. So I know there's additional things that take place during the month of October. In addition to that, our social and emotional learning curriculum throughout the year has several units on bullying. And so we do know that has happened. Now, are we there yet in terms of fully systematizing that? I want to hear from our principals in terms of where we can go. But I definitely hear you in terms of, yes, there's bullying. And then given the time that we're living in today, bullying with a focus on immigration. And so I've talked to several principals about how prevalent are you seeing that in your buildings? And some are not seeing it. I'm not saying it's not happening. Please don't. I'm not saying it's not happening, but a lot of them are saying it's other type of bullying that we need to address. And so at this time, I want to hear from our principals in terms of some things that you're doing in your buildings to address face-to-face bullying training.
I would say I do support having the training in person before school starts, only because sometimes our team members don't have the technology access for start of school, and Dr. Giovanni's office worked to ensure we had to do in-person training at the start of school, and it worked. So I think that we can have a system to have the in-person training before school, very similar to what we implemented this year, that you turn around very quickly, and we were able to do that. So I think that we have an example for another mandatory training that we had to do. And recognizing that a lot of staff members do not have technology access needed at the start of school, as a principal, I would support that. And I can't tell you what to do because I'm not a superintendent, but I feel that we have a system that would support it. And there is value to having the training in person. So I love the idea.
I have to also agree. I think it's very imperative that we have that at the beginning of the year, but I also think it's important for us to have that continuous cycle throughout the year as a refresher. For me in my school, we just kind of take the initiative. It was important for me to make sure we had like that social emotional coach who could identify our students, who can identify the possible bullying incidents, along with my counselor, along with my social worker. And then we spent a lot of time just trying to educate one another on what are some of the things that we could possibly miss, because I'm still learning the different cultures and the language and things of that nature. Just like today, we had a situation in which a student made a comment, and it was deemed as innocent, but I had to go back and explain to the student, these are some very trying times right now. And so I think for the district, having that training at the beginning of the year, also having that refresher throughout the year is very imperative.
I mean, I would agree with both my principal colleagues. In-person trainings are way better than online trainings. Like, I fully support an in-person training. I'd also like to highlight what Dr. Lewis mentioned, and like the commitment to SEL curriculum. It takes me 30 minutes in the elementary setting, which we are committed to doing, and receiving ongoing training. As you mentioned, like, it's as important as the initial training. So I agree that this should be an in-person thing, and it should be ongoing.
Thank you for that, and given that, I think it sounds like all the principals who spoke are in alignment that this training is critical. It's critical to have it in person. It's critical to have it ongoing. So we missed the mark for the beginning of this year. I know Carrington had it for classroom teachers, which is great. It hasn't happened at many other work sites. So will you commit to making sure that all work sites have training for all staff in person, given the crisis we're in right now in our schools with this issue in particular?
Yes, and I think there's maybe some models out there that we can look at, balancing the feedback we get from our teachers too, in terms of meaningful professional development. So I would want the teacher's lenses on that as well, because what I don't want this to be is like the old blood-borne pathogens training that we so I really want it to be meaningful in a way that's engaging and that's also actionable, and then maybe put systems in place to review it every year or every other year.
Great, so looking forward to following up about action steps about that ASAP for this year. So before we move on, I just want to come back to a couple of the items that we touched on to just make sure we are clear on the commitments that are being made. So we're hearing that Dr. Lewis, you're willing to urge the board together with us to urge the board to expedite and put policy 5120 revisions as well as the private zones policy at the top of the list with priority. So that's for tomorrow's meeting.
Let me be clear. I will communicate with the board. I can urge them to do anything, but I can communicate with them, but also recognizing, I think you all have seen how they have tiered the policies based on statute and by law, what they have to have in place by a certain date. Yes, this is equally important, but I just want to be clear that of the tiers, it's not like they were just sitting in the room and say, hey, let's start with this. But there was some rationale as it relates to why some of those policies rose to the level of tier 1. I think Dr. Giovanni wants to add something, because she's on the policy committee.
So we really need to, for time, we need to keep it tight here, but.
Thank you. I did, Dr. Lewis has said, I just want to second that. I don't want anyone sitting here to think that the policy committee or the board was flippant about where to place these items on revising the policies. And to Dr. Lewis's point, they spent a significant amount of time, and I spend a significant amount of time with the policy committee talking about how to tier these policies. And so it was presented in the board meeting. We do have open public policy committee meetings as well. So I think that to that point, you are welcome and encouraged to attend policy committee meetings and share with the board how you want these things to be rated. You are encouraged and welcome to come to board meetings, write in public comment and say, board members, I see that you have tiered Narcan above the bullying or the law enforcement policy. We don't agree with that. And then the board can hear what your feedback is. But I just want to make it clear that it was a very difficult decision for them, because they do recognize how urgent all of these items are. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I think, again, we're in a crisis right now. We put these plans on your desk back in February. We could have had this stuff in place. So the moment we're in now calls for urgent action. And, you know, we hear the response about the policies. It sounds like there's a commitment to urge the board together to prioritize this, but I also want to talk about what is the plan. We don't want to talk about the details of the plan, but I'm telling you here that staff in our work sites do not know what is the plan, what is the protocol if ICE were to come near or on campus. So we have heard you say there's a plan that has been communicated to admin, but it's not enough for just admin to know. All staff need to be briefed on what is the protocol. If the protocol is, in fact, the ICE needs to have a signed judicial warrant, which, by the way, needs to be signed, not just a judicial warrant, that's what we've seen in the communication coming out. What does that look like? We all need to know what that looks like. What do we do if they don't have a warrant and they're wanting to come on campus? How might we recognize suspected immigration enforcement vehicles in carpool? All staff at all work sites, whether I'm a bus driver, a cafeteria worker, an IA, front office, we all need to know, because, the same way lockdown procedures are shared, right? We get trained on a lockdown procedure, we get trained on a hurricane procedure, we get a fire drill today. What is the protocol? And all staff need to be trained. So can we expect all staff to be briefed immediately on those protocols? Because people want to know, and we should have known before this week.
I have notified my staff of the protocols, and I can't speak for what other people and other principals have done.
The question is actually for Dr. Lewis. We're asking Dr. Lewis to give directive to all principals to make sure that all staff get information. Because,
I'm not gonna speak for Dr. Lewis, but that information was shared with all principals.
That information has been shared with all principals. All principals have shared the portion of those directives and protocols that are appropriate to share with staff.
I'll clarify. And for Jordan High School, I've shared with admin and front office staff. So I'll take the responsibility that I need to communicate with whole staff. But I shared with student services receptionists, front office receptionists, admin, anybody who would have access.
We've also shared that information. We actually had a meeting this morning with my leadership team regarding protocol, but we also sent out information to our entire staff, letting them know what rights families have, what we are supposed to do in a crisis. And we're going to continue to reiterate that until our families and our students feel that they're safe to come back into our buildings.
so I'm gonna once again direct this to Dr. Lewis, because principals are looking to you for what to do, and all staff, it seems like all work sites did get uniform communication yesterday, which is great, that's the kind of thing that we need. But what we got yesterday was not sufficient. We need to know, and we need to know what to do in the event that this happens. We had a lockdown today at my school. Kids were worried it was ICE on campus because there were a bunch of police cars. Everybody went to panic. None of the staff that I communicated with, I know our admin know, we don't know the protocol. We're asking you to make sure principals know that all staff need to know what is the protocol, not just a few. Because what if our principal's off campus and ICE comes? We have 30 doors that could open up into the outside. There's not just one place people might be coming onto campus. So what we are coming here today and telling you is that there's very uneven communication happening across the district. Some principals send out emails proactively on Monday morning. Others were waiting for guidance from you, right? So we need to have even communication. We need all staff, all DPS employees to be trained, just like we're trained in a fire drill, just like we're trained in a hurricane drill. What is the plan for when ICE comes to campus? Can you commit to making sure that happens immediately?
Yes, we're already done that, and we can recommit. We remind principals. Yeah, we can do that.
We're gonna move on. So I'm gonna pass it to, I believe this is to Ms. Truitt.
All right, so we're on paid bereavement leave for all staff, all right? So in almost every other state and in most jobs in North Carolina, including state employees, workers are granted paid leave when there is a death in their personal lives, but not in DPS. When tragedy occurs, certified employees have to take personal leave. Even worse, classified employees don't have personal leave and are told that they can take unpaid leave. Now, that's just not right. I'm gonna pass this to Mr. Goldston.
My name is Randy Goldston. If someone's mother, father, sister, brother need a time off from a past to gather their thoughts, I think it's really important that we get it. We don't have to worry we shouldn't have to worry if we're gonna lose a roof over our head or if we're gonna still have a job when we come back. We need it so we can have security and a peace of mind when we need it. That's the Miss Parkstone.
Hi, I'm Angel Parkstone. One of my staff lost their mother. He took 2 weeks off. After the third day, I was given orders I needed to give him a leave request form. I was told if you miss more than 3 days, you are considered abandoning your job. I lost my godfather and uncle on the same day that my employee lost his mother. I had to take sick leave for both of their funerals. That's just not right.
So as we know, when you lose a loved one, you need that time to be healthy and grieve and be in the right state of mind. And so what we're asking is that we need time to ensure that we're the best version of ourselves. And we are requesting that DPS and Meet and Confer work collaboratively to adopt this policy and bringing the bereavement policy to the board so that all members in the DPS family, both certified and classified staff, can receive paid bereavement leave. That's our question. That's our request.
Thank you. Just want some clarity on your slide. When you indicate classified employees don't have personal leave, they do have annual leave. And so I don't know who is telling them they can take unpaid leave. They are able to use annual leave. And as Angel indicated, can you go back to the other things? As Angel indicated that she had to use sick leave. So I do want to get some clarity on that, that is not exactly accurate. With regard to the bereavement leave, it's kind of similar to the maternity leave. It's something that I think all schools around North Carolina need to continue to lobby the legislature for, right? They eventually did have paid maternity leave. That's not something that Durham Public Schools can afford in the budget to pay for, but now it is paid through the state. And so I think where we continue to operate is that that's an item that potentially, for those of you who watch the board is looking at a legislative committee, and that's an area for you to represent and provide the information and to join the board members in the legislative committee in lobbying on Jones Street that they expand this bereavement leave that goes to state employees to all school employees around North Carolina, because our budgets are obviously already stretched very short.
Thank you for that. So we're proposing that DPS can solve this problem. And we think we need bereavement leave. Everyone should have it. I don't think we need to get into the weeds about what type of leave we have to take now that we don't have paid bereavement leave. Like any other employee in the state, we should also have paid bereavement leave. And so what we're asking is, Dr. Lewis and your team, how it sounds to you, is this something y'all will be willing to collaborate to bring forward to the board as a joint proposal?
So I think I would not say that is the case. I think our best, what is for all of us to work together and go to the state of North Carolina and say, you're paying state employees for bereavement leave, provide that bereavement leave to public school employees as well. So that I can commit to supporting lobbying efforts with the legislative committee and with the legislature for them to provide those payments.
Thank you, Dr. Giovanni. So I guess the question is to Dr. Lewis and to the team. We spent lots of time as a team together looking at, preparing for this meeting, looking at what was going to be brought to the agenda. We've developed as a team what we're bringing forward. And so we hope and would ask your team to do the same. And we think this is a pretty small lift. It would make a big difference for all of our coworkers when they have a crisis and they turn around and find out we don't even have paid bereavement leave. We can solve this problem in Durham now. We don't have to wait for the state to do it. I agree. It should be done at the state level. We don't have to wait for that. We can do it in Durham now. This is a pretty simple thing. And so can we move forward? And if not, if the answer is no, then we'll move on to the next item. But again, just one more time, what is their willingness to see what of this proposal y'all be willing to bring forward to the board. Are there parts that resonate? You know, what, we think that this is a good plan. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this proposal.
I looked at the slide and I agree that there should be some form of bereavement leave. My question was like, what's the application of that look like? Is it for any family member? Is it for any friend? Is it for immediate family? How are we defining the immediate family? Is it 5 days for everybody? Do I get to choose how many days? Like the number 5, the 2-day travel extension, so it's up to 9 days. Like, I just had questions about how as a principal, I would like manage this person being gone for up to 9 days. Or I guess it would be 7 on a weekend and the 2 days. So I think it's an idea. I don't have a full understanding how leave is differentiated. Like I don't think you can take annual leave when kids are in the building. And so you're taking sick leave. I'm open to having a conversation. I just have a lot of questions about practically how this gets implemented, like at a building level, and how I cover classrooms for the extended amount of time. And it connects to something you're going to talk about in a little bit about extra duty. Like when it's sub bills and I have to cover a class for 5 days and there's no sub to do it, like where does the funding come from that and all of that? Unfortunately, a lot of this is rooted in money too, right? And so like Mr. Teeter is much smarter than I am in that area, but I just have a lot of questions like how I can manage this at a building level.
Thank you for that. And I can just say it's already happening. I already have coworkers who took 2 weeks because their wife's father, who was a father to him, passed, and he used all his sick leave and took unpaid leave. Like, we're already doing it. Give us the decency of actually paying us for it, so we don't have to not just have a loss in the family, but also lose income. That's the ask. So I think, yeah, when folks are out, we gotta figure it out. It's already happening. So again, and again, to the team and to Dr. Lewis and your team, are y'all willing to work together on bringing this to the board?
Okay, so first I agree, right? Bereavement leave should be a thing. And I reflect my first year as a state employee, lost a grandparent. I had to use sick leave as a very new state employee, and that was very difficult to forfeit that kind of leave so early. And I think we do, it's something we want to make sure we do it the right way, right? So we do, just at a minimum, we would want to make sure that we have conversations with the State Board of Education and their council anytime we're working with something like leave. We run into this issue quite often, for example, with the Juneteenth holiday. Right, so that's a holiday that's been made available for state employees, but not for public school system employees, right? So we've run into kind of similar challenges with that issue as well. So we would want to be very careful, have conversation with those folks to make sure we don't have a compliance issue. And then also making sure that the state treasurer and the folks that manage retirement system, et cetera, that we don't have issues there from a compliance perspective. But I think, the short answer is we'll do our homework on that to make sure we think about that in the right way and that we don't do it in a way that causes us issues. And it's certainly also something as we're developing the superintendent's budget priorities, that's something that we can lift up through that process as well and take a look at that traction.
Thank you for that. And yeah, again, appreciate the willingness to look into it, to cost it out, to do the homework about the technicalities. Would y'all be willing to bring any counter proposal back to, on this to the December meeting?
I'm seeing Dr. Lewis nod his head, yes.
Great. Then let's move on. So I'm gonna pass it to Ms. Lopez.
I'm going to start with a question for everyone in the room. If you work in DPS and have had a coworker leave because of burnout, unreasonable expectations, or unmanageable workloads, please raise your green card and keep them up. If you're a DPS parent or community member and your student has lost a favorite staff member for those same reasons, raise your green card as well. And if that loss had a real impact on a student, fewer adults in the building, less support, a classroom that felt less stable, raise your red card too. I gotta see all you guys. Okay. These cards reflect what our students experience when the adults they rely on can no longer afford to stay. Across DPS, teachers, custodians, social workers, EC educators, bus drivers, IAs, and so many more, staff are stretched thin. And when staff are stretched thin and forced to choose between showing up for their students or their own families, students feel it. The specifics of this proposal were created by an article team representing many roles across the district, many of whom are here today, because we all share the same goal. Students deserve consistent, well-staffed, and safe schools. To get there, workers need fair expectations, clear contracts, and compensation for the extra duties they're asked to take on. We're here because this is an opportunity to craft a policy together that meets the needs of staff, and most importantly, supports the students at the center of our work. When we support the people who make schools run, we support the students who make schools matter.
So, I think just for time, I'll just put up, these are the questions that we considered as we worked to develop our proposal. And again, these proposals came out of conversations all over the district, thousands of conversations over a couple of years, and 40 platform development sessions, engaging with workers in all different roles, and whether, it's a custodial worker, EC teachers, social workers, classroom teachers, librarians, all of us are taking on many different things outside of what we were hired to do, most often without pay, and that's a really big problem. And so these are the things we were looking at taking care of. How can there be some consistency and transparency across work sites when it comes to extra duty and also being paid for that or compensated? What steps can HR take to make contract information more accessible? And most important, and the reason why we're at this table, how can this policy improve staff morale and staff retention? Next slide, please. So to Dr. Lewis and your team, these are some of the questions we want to offer y'all to be considering as we go through our proposal and have this dialogue. So if we present this proposal jointly to the board, what parts resonate? What might you want to change? What in this proposal is your team ready to support today? And what additional information do you need to move the proposal forward? I'm going to pass it to Vice President Patterson.
Just before, I think, so I can be considering the questions, can you clarify what the proposal is exactly?
Well, you have it in your packet, and we're about to go through it, so.
Oh, you haven't gone through it, okay.
Yeah, thank you for that clarified question.
So when staff are supporting our students thrive, clear contracts and fair compensation are essential to retaining high-quality educators and staff so students benefit from consistent, caring relationships every day. Ensuring educators have the time and capacity to design engaging, effective learning experiences, fostering stable, supportive school communities where students feel safe, valued, and ready to learn. Promoting accountability and transparency so staff can focus fully on advancing student growth and achievement. We want to highlight the second bullet on this slide. Overwhelmingly, school-based staff report that they do not have adequate time to prepare for their students. This includes classroom educators and support staff. In a few minutes, you will hear specific information about EC and social worker caseloads from our DAE team members. I am now going to pass it to Ms. Billinger.
Thank you. The Board of Education should recognize that all public school employees are the foundation of student achievement. Every success story in our schools begins with the people who make learning possible, the bus drivers and monitors who get our students to school safely, the cafeteria workers who are making sure every child is nourished and ready to learn, our custodians who keep classrooms clean and healthy, and the support staff and educators who meet students' academic and emotional needs every single day. Safe transportation, nutritious meals, cleaning our learning spaces, and strong supports are not extras. These are essential parts of what help our students learn and grow. When any one of these areas breaks down, it directly impacts our students' ability to focus, engage, and succeed. This is why clarity and fairness matter. When every employee has clearly defined duties and is compensated equitably for the work they do, we ensure quality services, reduce turnover, and build stability across all of our schools. Consistent, supported adults means stronger relationships with students and better learning environments. In short, investing in and respecting public school employees is investing in student success. And we know that when we're splitting our time between other duties, we have less time to focus on our students, right? And we're all sitting at this table today because students are our number one priority. When we're stretched too thin, we cannot focus on them the way that they deserve. I'm gonna pass it to Ghosh.
All right, good evening, y'all. We're just looking at some key terms. Go ahead and take a picture of it so that we can all be on the same page. It'll last longer than the slide. We wanna get together, dialogue, collaborate. We have to be off the same sheet of music. So we're activating prior knowledge, giving you a little preview, and this is what we're gonna be talking about. So I'm gonna pass it back to Ms. Frager.
Thank you. So right now, thinking about the contracts that we currently get, right, the thing that comes through email, through Droplet, what we currently have is this very vague document, right? It tells us what the term of our contract is, which I know mine said 4 years. It gives a very vague legal mumbo jumbo about compensation, but nothing very specific to my actual role or how much money I actually make. It lists license qualifications, and then it mentions duties. And when it says duties, it says all duties assigned by designee. All duties assigned. That essentially means anything your supervisor tells you, you have to do. We know that that is something that directly impacts our students. Can you raise your hand in the audience if you or someone that you know has been directed to be a testing coordinator, an MTSS coordinator on top of a teacher role or the actual role that you applied for and you were hired for? You were told you're doing another role. You or your coworkers, if you know someone. This status quo that we see is exploiting our compassion. Public education runs on unpaid labor, and that directly hurts kids. I have a story to share from a media coordinator in Durham Public Schools. This media coordinator applied for a professional job that required a professional license, and that's what that media coordinator expected their job to be. It is a student-facing role, right? A person who directly interacts with students on a daily basis to benefit their education. That person was then told to be the tech person on top of their media coordinator role. They were told to distribute Chromebooks. They were told to pass out chargers. They were told to manage all IT tickets in the school. They were told to change passwords all day long. And then on top of those extra things, they were also told to be the testing coordinator. That person no longer works for DPS. We lost a qualified media coordinator because unrealistic job expectations were placed on that person, which was not what they agreed to when they applied for that job. How many people here, again, know either yourself or know a staff member that has left Durham Public Schools or thought of leaving because you are doing an additional job other than the job that you applied for? You are now going to hear some stories from my coworkers. I'm going to pass it to Ms. Lopez first.
I've been a social worker in DPS since 2020. For 4 out of the 6 years, I've had to take on the role of social worker and counselor due to counselor turnover. No one explicitly told me to take on both roles, but when I looked at the needs of our students, I couldn't let them go without support. And despite doing everything I could, I'm certain some slipped through the cracks because it's not humanly possible for one person to do both jobs well. The national recommendation is 1 counselor and 1 social worker for every 250 students. In DPS, we have caseloads 3 or 4 times that routinely. When caseloads are that high and roles are combined out of desperation, students lose time, support, and access to trusted adults. Personally, for me, carrying 2 emotionally demanding jobs took a toll on me and by extension, my family. One year, I considered it a good day if I made it home without crying. In the midst of that, I asked about extra duty pay, not because money would fix the situation, but because it would at least acknowledge the reality of what I was being asked to do every day. I asked someone about this and they laughed and said, "This is just what we do to make things run." That moment felt like a gut punch. I felt exploited and I thought about quitting almost every day after. But I stayed because I kept wondering, if I leave, who will be there to sit with a student through crisis? Who will tell a child who just tore up a classroom that they're not a bad kid? Who will listen to the student whose family is in chaos and remind her that none of it is her fault? My story is not unique, and this is what happens when unmet staffing needs fall on the shoulders of individual workers. It forces people to choose between showing up for students and taking care of their own families. And that is not fair to staff or to our students. And now I'll pass it to Mr. Goldstone.
When custodians are out and there are no subs available, those working are asked to do extra hallways and when there are an event, we are asked to do the duties after the event, cleaning up. All staff that takes an extra duty that are outside their regular duties should be given the choice between comp time and extra duty pay. For part-time staff that are asked to do extra duties, they should be given the opportunity to volunteer to pick up extra hours. For people being required to work extra hours, which may cause disruption because of childcare or a second or third job, they should be given the additional compensation if the notice is provided within a certain period of time. For example, if they are told the day of or the day before and no one is willing to volunteer to get the extra hours, then those forced should get additional pay on top of what their regular rate of pay. I pass it to Coach.
I want to talk about, we all know there are EC vacancies, all those jobs are not filled. IAs are covering classes as doing what the teacher should be doing. Other EC teachers have to split up the vacant caseloads to cover paperwork. It's hours of extra work. It's work that people have to take home. It's, it's just gonna be 4 extra kids if we all split it up among the rest of us. But that is extra work on top of what you were actually hired to do. And it's exploiting our compassion once again to just be like, let's take on a little extra 4 kids. And we got to do it. It's the IDEA law, but it's not, nobody's worried about all the particulars of that law when an IA has to be the teacher for the entire year in one of these special programs classes. So when we're adding on all these extra hours of work and work that is not accounted for during the school day, it takes our focus away from the students we're supposed to be serving directly, and we can't serve them the best we can. So I'll pass to Ms. Filliger.
DAE is calling on DPS leadership to make a simple, meaningful change that strengthens our schools from the inside out. Every DPS employee deserves a printed and digital contract each school year that clearly outlines job duties, expectations, and salary. When educators and staff have clarity about their roles and compensation, they can focus their energy where it matters most, on our students. Clear contracts help reduce confusion, burnout, and turnover, which means more consistency and, again, stability for our students. Our students thrive when their teachers and school staff feel valued and supported. By providing contracts within 2 weeks of salary finalization and upon new hire or hire for new employees, DPS can build a foundation of trust that directly supports the people who support our students in the classrooms every single day. I already shared what our current contracts look like, and we have brainstormed. We've done a lot of work with this. We've talked to a lot of employees. We've talked to classified workers, certified workers, people from all different walks of life in DPS. And these are some agreements that we believe every contract should have. A contract should clearly state what your expected job duties are, not any duty assigned by your supervisor. It should clearly say what your job duties are. Compensation details should be very clear. You are a teacher on year 11, according to the North Carolina, whatever legislator scale, this is your salary for that year. Including a 30-minute duty-free lunch for all full-time staff. That is a basic act of compassion that y'all can show us, guaranteeing us a duty-free lunch. 30 minutes without supervisory duties. Each contract should also define the regular school day for that position. We know that it's gonna look different, right? Elementary, middle, high, it's gonna look different for certified positions, but every contract should stay. These are your contracted hours. This is when you're expected to arrive. This is when you're expected to leave. And any duties outside of those, of that day, or your job duties that are listed in your contract would be considered extra duty. And I will pass it to Swing.
Gonna be brief here, but just want to make sure everyone is aware, a planning period is not free time. It's time that we, and in high school level, we're very lucky, we have a lot more than elementary and middle, but it's every single minute of that time, I need on the daily to grade work, to plan lessons, to attend IEP meetings, to collaborate with coworkers, to do pre and post observation conferences, paperwork for MGS, like every single thing I'm doing to prepare for my students, that I need that time and more, and that goes for all of us, and so just to kind of make sure everyone understands that when that time is taken, then there's all the other work that we needed to do in that time that we need to then do outside of work, before or after school, and so just making sure that's clear, that's the give and take. And then Ms. Fuller already mentioned this, but all full-time employees should be guaranteed a 30-minute duty-free lunch. That's all classified and certified. And I'm gonna pass it to Ms. Daniels-Ruth. Yes, every day.
Good evening. My name is Rita Daniel-Ruth. I'm a bus driver, so I'm going to address extra duty pay in the lens of my work. Generally, a driver is assigned 1 to 3 routes per shift. A long time ago, because I have been here a long time, if we did an extra route on top of our normal workload, we received anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour of extra time. Now, we don't. Some days, my coworkers and I are given several extra routes daily. We should get paid extra because it causes extra stress for the driver and for our students, because it causes our own students that we are assigned to drive every day to be late or not be picked up at all, so that we can accommodate all the routes. And I do have a question. We know that we're getting students to school safely, and this is paramount. Giving extra blocks of time for extra routes is what we deserve. Dr. Lewis, is this something that your team can support?
First of all, I think it was mentioned at last meeting, and I think it bears repeating at this meeting. I don't think there's anything that's being proposed last meeting and this meeting that we don't agree with. And I want to say that this is the meeting for the committee. I think we all agree with a lot of this. I think it's the how we get to that end. And so the question was, can we commit to? Because we talked about a lot, and I want to have some questions too.
Specifically, extra time blocks, extra blocks of time for extra routes for drivers is the question.
So I think it kind of goes back to all of this, right? And so first of all, let's go back to the printed contracts, if that's okay.
We're gonna, I think you can just, if you have a brief response, and then we're gonna move along, and then we'll have time at the end to discuss the entirety of it.
Yeah, this is a committee discussion. So, because I want to get to the extra duty, and I think it aligns with that question. I think every employee deserves a contract that's accessible, easily accessible to them. I think we all remember the last meeting I was in here, right? So I know we were using Droplet, and I'm gonna ask Dr. Giovanni to chime in here. I know we're using Droplet for those contracts digitally. Are we still using Droplet? Because I know we were trying to phase away from Droplet because there were some technical issues with Droplet.
Sort of. We do have some residual in Droplet, and we'll continue to use that until there is a full transition to the new document management software. Just for clarity, certified staff and people classified as 50% teachers and those providing instructional services by statute are provided contracts in Durham. Classified are not, except at the cabinet level. I think 2 meetings ago or 2 sessions ago, I think that was stated. I think it might have been the first official meet and confer meeting. I think I did share that we were committed to providing those who are not entitled to contracts per statute and best practices with a letter that indicated what their compensation was and some of the information that's in a contract. I, as I said the last time, right, it is a committee, so I can only speak for myself, but I would not recommend that the district incur those additional liabilities that are not mandated by statute for contracts for classified staff.
Thank you for that, and we're gonna continue moving along with our presentation, and we'll have more discussion at the end. So thank you all. I'm gonna pass it to Ghosh.
Are we still talking on contracts? That's a
So, we are discussing contracts and extra duty pay, and then Ms. Daniel Ruth had a more direct, specific question regarding extra time for driver routes. We've heard the response, and we're gonna now continue making sure you hear the whole presentation, and then we'll come back at the end and have dialogue to discuss the entirety. So I'm gonna pass it to Ghosh.
I do think that it is important to note that with regard to the extra routes, that Mr. Barnes is here and he oversees the transportation part. We have had some preliminary conversations with the transportation staff and workers regarding that. For example, there was conversation that potentially, and a lot of this is additional conversation, which is why I appreciate this, right? To get the feedback from you all on kind of what it is that would help ensure that our students get to school on time and are experiencing the teaching and learning and excellent instruction that all of you provide. So we did have some conversations around those, but as I've told you all before, I am not that person who thinks that I have all of the answers, right? I want to collaborate. I want to get that feedback and that input. And in doing that, one of the preliminary conversations around the bus drivers is to potentially have like a pool. Like if you need extra routes, let folks sign up for those. Because one of the complaints that I heard when I met with the bus drivers is that they were being mandated. Like they could have, their child could have a football game and their supervisor was like, no, you're gonna drive this extra route. And so when that was shared with me, those were when we started having those conversations with the supervisors that you need to work with the drivers because there's other people that want to earn some additional pay, right? And we want to make sure that folks aren't just being, they're being appreciated. So those are conversations that have been happening pre-meet and confer with the transportation team and will continue. So that would be the answer, I think, to your question about the extra hours or extra routes.
Yeah, thank you for answering the specific bus question. And we're going to continue with the contract and extra duty pay proposal and try to dialogue and collaborate on that and see if y'all have a counter proposal. So with extracurricular and extra duty, as I word extra, there's a sense like maybe you're just taking on light work. And there's like an undertone of if you really care about the kids or if you're really a team player, you'll do these things. Again, exploiting our compassion, but they have to all be fairly compensated. If you're keeping the school yearbook alive with an after-school club, you're upholding a community culture that should be valued, and it should get compensated the same across the district for that task. And it's the same again, when you take additional coverage as a teacher or additional caseload, as a EC teacher, this is extra work. This is what you should be paid for. That's your job already. And the max load is the number of students you're able to cover. That's workers doing their job extra. When the cap is 30 and you have 38 students on your caseload, you should get compensated for that extra work. So next slide, please. I'm not gonna read through all these, but take a look real quick. Raise your hand, show a green card if you've done any of these duties on top of the duties you were hired for. Now raise a red card if you didn't get paid for that extra duty. Okay, so our proposal is that if you're doing these things, if it's extra work, you get extra pay. I'm gonna pass it back to Ms. Filliger.
Thank you. So we've done a lot of research on the current board policy that exists around contract or around extra duty pay. And something that we were made aware of was this compelling need waiver. Show us a green card if you've ever received a compelling need waiver for extra duty. Show us a green card if you know what a compelling need waiver is before this slide. Okay, so essentially a compelling need waiver is this idea that if there's a need known ahead of time, right, by a supervisor, the board must approve that situation based on the superintendent's written recommendation. If there's not enough time, if there's not a board meeting prior to the event that needs the extra duty, then the superintendent can then issue a temporary waiver and then report it later. Principals can only assign short-term waivers up to 5 days for urgent needs, which would come about with like urgent absences or ways that we need to staff the building to keep students safe. Staff have the right to receive documentation about waivers that affect them. And the real question that I have around waivers is, are these being communicated transparently and consistently to staff? I don't think that that's happening. We know that's not happening. When waiver decisions aren't shared openly, that's undermining trust and accountability, and transparency has to be the standard. So again, we know that these waivers are not being shared with staff. If these things aren't happening, it is very aware that staff are not even aware of this part of the policy. I'm going to pass it now to, Ms. Daniel Ruth.
All right, I'm going to be explaining a little bit about what comp time is. Comp time is paid time off that an exempt or salary employee earns instead of receiving immediate overtime pay or working extra hours. If you are an exempt or a salary employee, in many cases, you are not given a choice of having comp time or being paid overtime. Comp time is the default. If you have only 3 months to use it, but your job requires you to be present daily, when do you get to use it? In many cases, supervisors tell you when to use your time that you earned, but you didn't ask for. If salary personnel earn 240 hours of comp time, that they are supposed to receive overtime after that. Very seldom do salary personnel get overtime pay. Classified salary employees should have a choice between overtime pay and comp time. And at this time, we're going to hear a little more on comp time from Ms. Parkstone.
For comp time, they always use it first without asking if we want to use it instead of annual leave. But for employees, we have to ask them if they prefer without pay or annual leave. But they get paid overtime. But we are not shown the same respect. They automatically use comp time and give us a hard time about getting the comp time. It's not like we want to get comp time. It's just people call out and we have paperwork that has to be complete before we can even leave for the day.
Next slide, please. Again, board policy. We have two board policies that revolve around comp time. So we have policy 7500 and policy 7510. I extracted some key points from those two board policies that are on the board. We want to be clear. We're not saying get rid of comp time. We don't think that that's a solution. We don't think anybody wants that. What we are saying is that we want the policy to be enforced as it's written, and we know that that's not happening. And that's a concern, right? If any board policy is not actually being followed, that's a problem. And we want to give our employees the option to opt for either comp time or extra duty pay for those extra duties. And I'll pass it to Ms. Swain.
Okay, I think the problem is very clear. Work gets piled on top of work, and it's a critical problem to address. We know, especially if we're gonna stop the turnover crisis in our schools. So we know DPS values staff, which is why moving forward with a joint proposal on this topic is the logical next step to support staff. And your team is engaging from an administrative point of view on how to recommend solving the issue. And we as workers recommend how we solve the problem. And so we're looking for the overlap, right? Where we can have, right now, today, we have a unique opportunity to come together to develop a joint proposal. And so given that you've heard now the full proposal, and there's a lot of details, but I think the meat of it is clear job descriptions for all employees, so that then when extra work is being given or on, A, we have a choice to do it or not, and then B, we are compensated for that time, whether that is with choosing to take comp time in the case of an employee where that's applicable, or getting extra duty pay. So that's the proposal in summary. And hearing all that, and you guys have had these slides for a couple weeks, we would love to hear now what resonates with the team, what do you feel your team can support, what would you need to move some of these components forward. So we'll turn it over to your team now to discuss and respond.
I'll start. So I think I'd shared with you all in a previous meeting that we were working on the extra duty stipend charts. And so that work does continue. I think that Confer is an excellent medium for us to bring that back to you and get feedback, because we don't want, we want there to be equity in compensation for additional legitimate bona fide extra duty work. And so I have been working with Mr. Teeter on that. He has shared with me some additional information. And so once that is, I've parsed through that, and then he's reviewed it, and we've looked at the cost of this, because as Tyler said, I can't pronounce your last name. As Tyler said, all of this is money, right? I mean, none of us are naive. We do realize that we want to do that. I think we've all heard from the board dais, right? A lot of times they always say, we would love to pay more, we would love to do this, but we can't. And so, but looking at this, what makes the most sense, what is best practices, what is equitable, and what the district, being vetted by our CFO, can afford is what we want to work through with you.
Stephanie, for those that want to know how to say my last name, is Stephanie. I mean, I agree that everybody in this room does not make enough money for the work that they do, and they do more work than anybody should ever ask them to do on a daily basis. So I just acknowledge that. I'm in a very small school. I have 300 students. And so I don't pretend like what happens at Moorhead is replicable everywhere, but we find ways to give our teachers 105 minutes every day, duty free. And so I think even in the existing salary structure that we have, I think there are ways to give some of the stuff you're talking about back to staff. I know talking to my principal colleagues at the elementary level, one of our frustrations is there's not an equitable distribution of resources to fund some of the required positions, right? Like MTSS coordinator, testing coordinator, all of those things. We're not a Title I school. My annual budget is very small, and I don't have extra money to just give to people to do these things. So someone has to do it, and it's on top of what they're already doing. And I ask them, and they do it. And like, I don't want them to have to work any later than anybody else, but sometimes they do because I know one of you said it's just what we do, right? And that's not okay. So I guess all that to say is like, I think I tell our staff, our job is a very personal profession, but it shouldn't define who we are. It's a piece of who we are, but we need to make time for ourselves to do other things, other places, and not be connected just to this work. And it's okay to walk away from it for your mental well-being. I think, say all that to say, like, some of the stuff, like, just stop and like work with your colleagues, have grace with people so they can't walk away from it, and find ways to provide some time. Because I heard a lot of you talk about time. Like, provide time within the current structure while we try to address what everyone I think agrees on, that we all deserve to be paid more money. I know y'all do. All of our teachers do. Like, if I could snap my fingers and pay everybody more, I absolutely would do that. I don't think anybody in this room would not. But we work in a state where our legislature is terrible. They don't value public education. They do everything they can to strip money and funding away from public education. And, you know, we can fight that battle there, and we can acknowledge that maybe we can do more at the district level as well. People smarter than me know where that money is and how to use it, but I'm gonna let Mr. Teeter talk about that. No.
Can I respond to that really quick? I really appreciate what you're saying. You know, as the leader of your school, you are very mindful about showing your teachers that appreciation and that understanding of the hard work that they do every day. But again, I think this really highlights the fact that I'm so excited that's happening at your school. We know that's not happening at all schools, right? We know all staff are not supported in that way, and that's why we need a school board policy that lays it out very clearly. That's not up for debate, right? It's not up for interpretation how it's actually played out. It is very clear. This is what every employee is entitled to. And so again, I applaud you. I think you sound like a great principal to work for, and I love that. But I love that for all of my colleagues, right? Every single worker in DPS deserves that same kind of treatment. And so we need a policy that makes that happen.
So I think to the schedules, right, I support sort of that effort to develop a standardized, sort of publicly available schedule around some of those activities. So when I came to Durham about a year ago, I inherited a crumbling folder full of documents that have yellowed with time from a budget manager that started here in the mid-90s, right? And that has history, right, of athletic pay and other things like that. And I was told to guard it like the Constitution, right? And that's just how archaic, right, we've been. And so I'm looking forward to us having some things more publicly available and consistent charts that are predictable, that we know what we're getting into. And certainly that's, like Dr. Giovanni said, that's something that we'll need to evaluate in cost. And I anticipate in this budget cycle coming up that we're gonna have requests from different leaders to address the value of coaching supplements, the value of art supplements and things of that nature. I think that's kind of where we are in this season with these sorts of things. On the comp time piece, I think is very interesting, and that's obviously that's a space that I scrutinize quite a bit in my work because it does represent a potential expense to the district, right? So if someone leaves us and, they have 100 comp time hours, we pay that out at the time an employee parts ways, and that's something that we always have to be prepared for. And then I think another side of that coin, when I'm working with employees and trying to advise them on looking at short-term and looking at long-term strategies, sometimes it's good, to use that comp time and save your annual leave and save your sick leave, right? And eventually, right, those things will accumulate into credible service, and help to perhaps enhance your retirement if you can preserve those in any way possible. But yeah, I think definitely it's a space we're looking at. And another thing that we really kind of focus on is we look for trends, right, with comp time, right? In what positions are we consistently seeing a lot of comp time? And then it raises questions of, okay, well, what's going on in that space, right? Are we needing to provide more support there? Is that where we need additional personnel? Are there other things going on in the environment that's prohibiting those folks from being able to do their job in the course of a normal day, right? So we do, it's certainly something we look at, and appreciate you for lifting up the comp time.
So reflecting on the guiding questions, so I'll try to be brief in my remarks. Again, a clear basic contract should be basic, just like leather and top. It should be basic. Every employee should have a standard contract with their duties, salary information, and one of my clarifying questions as it relates to the employment contract. Were you thinking salary information in addition to supplement as well, so the full package, so to speak? I see some heads.
Yeah, I think very clearly I should be able to look at it and know exactly what I'm bringing home, whether it's a monthly or a yearly. I think, yes, for sure, both the state and the supplement.
Okay, I think we're on. Any objections to that?
I just want.
Certified. Yeah. And that's easily accessible. Let me add that too.
Again, I think that's something we need to sit with. I do appreciate your feedback, because what you don't want, those, like, you have a yearly contract for a year, right? Then it's a 4-year contract. And so your salary is going to change and things are going to change throughout that. So what we can't do is bring back every time your salary changes or some other change happens to the board for their approval. So the way that the contracts, I'm happy to actually look at the contracts and kind of hear what some of the feedback is that still allows it to be a manageable process. That's 20, that's a lot of contracts, and we have a very small HR staff. And so I just want to be thoughtful around that, and that, to kind of have some actual detailed feedback regarding the contracts. Like so I think if you could maybe bring that back. I know we're getting we still have a lot of things to move through before 8 o'clock and this ends. But I think if you could do that, I'm happy to kind of take a look at those and consider that. But I just wanted you to understand that, like, what we can't have is a lot of detail in contracts aren't meant for that.
I actually have some sample contracts that we mocked up based on feedback from staff that I can actually deliver to you right now, if that's helpful. I have a custodian contract and a teacher contract. This was work that was compiled by the action team. Yeah, you can pass it out, sure. Yep.
Yeah, they electronically too.
They're copies, so this is teacher copies.
We'll share electronically. And I just want to add, I do support printed and digital contracts. And I think it would help principals if we had copies of the printed contracts, so we could follow up when our teachers have questions.
I think the big thing too was we think it's very important that we have a yearly contract, so we wouldn't run into that problem of your salary changes every year, right? Because if it's a yearly contract, that's going to be updated. In the proposal that we compiled, we also added, I believe, a clause that says, like, if the GA gives us a raise, you would get the higher of that amount. So we did consider those things as well.
And I just want to point out the key piece, which shouldn't be confusing because our pay, but the key piece for getting the contracts is, what are the duties? What is the job description? What is my job? And then, so I can clearly be able to see if I'm then asked to do something additional, my supervisor and I are very clear that that's something additional that would then what we're proposing, be eligible for extra duty pay. So that's the key piece. So a couple things, where's the money? So understandably, for some of these things that are currently not compensated at all, that's something to figure out. But take the example of custodial crew. So the night crew, right now they're working. On a given day, there might be, especially when it's flu season, 2 or 3 people out in my building. And what happens is everyone else who's there has to take on all the extra areas. So so for custodial staff, the part-time workers are eligible to get extra hours and get paid for those extra hours, whereas full-time are only eligible to get comp time. But what happens is that the part-time workers are told to do the extra work, but within the same amount of time. So it's all divided up, and they have to work double time in the same amount of time, and they're not compensated for the extra pay. That's when somebody was gonna be coming in and getting paid, so that money should be there to pay them for the extra time. What also often happens is they do the best they can to cover those areas, but if they don't finish, then the full-time workers in the daytime come in an hour early or are mandated to come in early so they can finish the area, and they're given comp time for that. One of the lead custodians at my school has like a year of comp time built up at this point, and it's just, I'm hearing they get paid out eventually, so getting a choice between getting paid for that immediately if they prefer to get paid for the extra hour they worked versus hoping that they'd eventually use it and not have to, so I think just to illustrate where the money is, if there are 2 EC vacancies at my school and those caseloads are distributed among the OCS teacher and the other inclusion teacher, and they're not able to serve their own kids because they're doing IEP meetings all day long, there should be funds allocated for those positions. The vacancy isn't filled. So maybe we can pull apart those situations where somebody already was supposed to do the job, the money should be set aside. That seems like one of the most simple things to start with moving forward. So could we move forward with moving that to the board as a joint recommendation?
So I think with that, sitting right with it, at first I thought we were thinking about like a sick leave scenario, right? Like if they're on sick leave, right, they're still getting paid, but in these vacancy situations, I do think that is an appropriate conversation to have about tapping into the lab salary to do something to support the people covering that. And I do think in the extra duty space, we do see a good bit of custodial extra duty come through for us to evaluate, and so certainly we need to recognize those folks. And Dr. Giovanni.
Thank you for lifting that up, and that is, we actually had a preliminary conversation around that. That is exactly right. Like if someone is, if there is a vacancy, that's one of the things that we are considering. And so I think to answer your question, like, can we bring it to the board now? Not yet, right? I think it's something that we need to work through and get that input. I think I would like to hear from, is it Mr. Goldston? Mr. Goldston, right? I think have those conversations around the table, right? Just to be honest, just authentic conversations to share all of you, like what these experiences are. We share what our experiences are with these, and then come up with something that makes sense for Durham Public Schools staff and budget. But yes, that is a consideration. Absolutely.
That's great to hear. And that's exactly why we're here. So I hope we can move forward with that. And then something else, and then just kind of to a point you made, Dr. Giovanni, about people should be able to choose if they take extra work or not. And tying it into there's some buildings where principals work hard to make sure that their staff are always getting a duty-free lunch and others not. That's another thing where, the example of the EC vacancy and there's money there, we get paid for covering classes now at high school and middle school. And we have for a while, And because through our union, we organized a long time ago for that win, and I think elementary school, that doesn't happen right now, it needs to, right? But yeah, that's something that we were able to work out. And also on top of that, at Riverside, we were able to work out a system where instead of being voluntold to do it, once there was a system in place where it was shared, we worked it out. So I think just the other component that seems pretty simple and not cost prohibitive is figuring out duty-free lunch, for example. That's something that all principals should be able to do. If you figure it out, some other worksites figure it out, other worksites should be able to figure it out too. So maybe sharing those best practices and giving guidance to principals to ensure that's happening at all worksites seems like another simple thing that we could move forward on today. And so is that something that we could explore moving forward on? Getting us best practices from the schools where you figured out how to make it work?
Yes.
Great. So I know we're gonna move along here, but before we wrap this section on contracts, extra duty pay, what we would hope and what we ask is that your team commits to bringing a counter proposal to all of the components that we brought here tonight. So we've heard a couple that it seems like there's shared interest to move forward on. They seem pretty, yeah, we can move forward on, or we can continue to explore. But the whole proposal, we would ask you to bring a counter proposal. Is that something you guys can commit to?
So can I ask this question? And maybe, different folks feel different about this than me. But, so, as opposed to sort of you guys bringing in, a number of bullets, right, that you confront us with, right? And then we go back and create a counter proposal. What if we just have a meeting and sit down together and try to develop a response or an approach together from the start, rather than, what's happening here? Because, I don't know about anyone else, but, I feel a little bit unfair because I feel like you come in and ask me to communicate or to commit to these things where, that's not an effective way to make policy, right? An effective way is to say, for instance, if you identify any one of the issues that we've identified tonight, right? You provide us with the names of 4 members of this committee that will sit down with 4 members on our side, and we sit down and work through what the policy will look like, and come to this meeting and share what we've worked through.
Yeah, so I think part of what I'm hearing you say, and we have alignment. We have these meetings on the calendar, but a lot of the work actually needs to take place in between the meetings, outside of this time, right? Our team spent a huge amount of hours to do the research and make draft contracts, and so, yeah, I think.
I don't think we're taking issue with that. What we're saying is, if there's work that is happening between the meetings, why can't we do that work collectively, like any other committee would do?
Yeah,
so that when we come to these meetings, we've already had the opportunity to work through these questions. We've already had the opportunity to say, I'm not sure I'm clear about that. Can you tell me how we would do that, right? But as we're doing it now, it doesn't feel like we're taking advantage of the opportunity to actually be cooperative.
So in our initial, I think working together outside of this space, if we're gonna move the work forward, absolutely should be on the table. I think that's part of why we're here, we wanna get some stuff done. What we don't wanna see is committees created on top of committees to stall things out, right? But if there's continued discussion, dialogue, collaboration outside of the space to move some of this stuff forward, that sounds great. We want the stuff to get implemented, because it's affecting our schools, we're in a crisis again, and the sooner we can work this stuff out, the better. So if y'all are willing to, do some workouts out, do some, figure some, I don't know, I mean, I think we have sent y'all the stuff a while ago and hope that you would have some responses to,
So I hear the point that you're making, and I think part of the reason that we're in this place to begin with, in this process of being Confer, is that we have found, to a large extent, that process ineffective. Prior to this, we were told the best way would be to meet with X, Y, or Z board member. We did that. Prior to that, it was you should send an email. We did that. We did all of those things on the path to getting to this point. And what we're doing is talking to thousands of people across the district. What we have in front of you and what we send to y'all well in advance in presentation form, in bullet point form, in every possible form, is the product of months of labor that gets put into these things. So it's a reflection not just of this body or conversations that we have with people in the district, it's a reflection of what we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis, which is different from what y'all are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. So we are bringing the experience of thousands of workers across the district, and you all can bring the experience of what is it like to deal with these issues from a management perspective. That's great, bring that. Bring that to this floor, that's what we're here for. We're bringing proposals, and you all can discuss them amongst yourselves and say, I like this, I don't like that, come back, we'll have a conversation, that's what we're here for.
Why do we have to do it separately? Why can't we work through a proposal together?
Our job
is to move these issues forward. Why can't we do it in a way that is collaborative and constructive?
The collaboration comes from, we provided this information well in advance, and you all have access to the information that we've now spent our extra time, which is extremely limited, in addition to all of the tasks that we've just described, going door to door, talking to people, setting up additional meetings, to then say we need to set up further committee meetings. It's, we're already doing an enormous amount of labor to bring this information to the table, and we're happy to dialogue about it. That's why we're here. But it's a bit frustrating to get to this moment when all of that labor has been put in to then say, can we have a separate meeting to discuss this? That's what we're at the table for. That's what we've provided the information for. And we're happy to discuss whatever counter proposals, information you have in response to what we've put together.
Thank you. It was just a suggestion to kind of move the work forward, because when we look at the information, we have questions, and then we have to wait till the meeting to ask the question. So we can continue with this. But I did have a question about the extra duty pay. When you were thinking about that, were you thinking like a standard hourly rate or your hourly rate that's derived from your salary?
It's in the proposal and it's on slide 21. So it would be your hourly rate. So whatever your position is, your hourly rate would be your annual salary divided by the duty days, divided by the hours per day is the calculation to determine the rate.
Can I?
Yes.
So just, I think, kind of to Dr. King's point, because I think the language is important and language matters. And so I think the counter proposal, like I don't see it as a counter to what you're doing. I see it as a collaborative, cooperative feedback to kind of what you are suggesting. Similar to what I was saying about the extra duty and stipend, right? I'm gonna work on it, put it in the best form that I can put it in. I'm not gonna be wedded to it, right? Because if I show up and I'm like, this is what I've spent hours working on, and if anybody has any negative thing to say about it, I'm just gonna shut down. I can't do that, right? I have to show up and say, here's the best that I can do. Please critique it, right? Make suggestions, make edits. Some of them, as you all know, I might say no, right? I'm like, no, I can't agree with that, or no, I can't do that for X, Y, and Z reasons. Mr. Teeter could say no, right? We can't afford that, et cetera. So I think that that's probably what
because I think it triggered it for me, just the counter, it's not, we are not across the table, we are around the table, right? This is a collaborative, respectful committee, and I value all of your input, and I hope that you value mine and everyone else's around this table.
Thank you for that, and we're gonna move now on to the salary implementation. So I'm gonna pass this to Coach.
Sorry, so were y'all gonna present the presentation you provided us?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so now it's time, please.
I'll try to pull it up.
Yeah, I thought it was me, and then she said, "Gosh." I said, okay. Let's see, okay.
This. These slides? Do I have this one?
So while we're waiting for that, just to be respectful, because we are in our final minutes here, I want us to at least make some headway here. So, the slides discuss policy, the salary administration policy. I think I shared with you all, and I don't think several of you had known about the fact that the board had adopted a salary administration policy. And so what we've done is just basically the policy applies to all certified and classified staff. And basically the primary focus on it is setting the standards, like giving definitions of various things. And I think kind of to note, just so that we are all singing from the same hymnal, right? What we mean when we're talking about a base salary, what we mean when we're talking about extra duty and stipends and comp time, et cetera. So primarily, it also lays out the fact that compensation, salary schedules, and pay increases are approved by one entity and one entity only, and that is the Board of Education. The superintendent and his staff have various duties in relation to implementation of the board's policies and pay increases and schedules. What we've looked at in the HR department is how is it that we assign people? And I think that was a big issue that I kind of picked up from, is how people are initially placed into positions, and then if someone's been in a role, and let's say that they've kind of picked up a lot of significant duties, right? Extra duty is one way to address that, but in the salary administration policy, there also is some ways to potentially address that with a job change, right? Or a title change. Because what we don't want, if you have people that are good and doing good work and doing extra work, what you don't want is to lose them, right? By not compensating them and recognizing the contributions that they are making. So the salary administration policy does reference ensuring that there are clear job duties. That is a task that I have assigned to the HR department to ensure that everyone in the district, everyone has an up-to-date, accurate job description. I do want to caution and say this so that everyone hears it. That does not mean that other duties as assigned will not be in job descriptions. I mean, that's a common phrase in a job description, but those are reasonable, right? And I think that that's where we want to get to, where we are. Next slide, please. Yes. I'm on compensation changes. I kind of talked through this already. Okay. So those are the reasons that we're looking at getting these various schedules and tables so that the board approves those, so that you don't end up with people kind of willy-nilly doing things. To Mr. Teeter's point, if he has no idea and people don't know how much extra duty may be out there or how many stipends may be out there, we can't budget for that. And we have to function within a budget. But if we have these schedules and we're following the salary administration policy and doing these things, we will know within a reasonable degree of financial certainty what our exposure is and our liability is for salaries and compensation. Next slide, please. Next slide. So what I wanted, and I think there was a question as to whether or not we would be willing to kind of talk through or I guess maybe collaborate on how people are placed on the levels when they're hired and how their positions are assessed when there's potentially a salary concern. And so really what I think the meet and confer can do, and is really more of a question for you all, is how do we ensure the implementation of the policy supports improving student outcomes, right? I think that we've all kind of say that, right? I think it's easy to say, oh, this is gonna help student outcomes. But in order for us to know that, like we have to together have those back and forth around the table conversations. And that's what I really need to do, right? Like I'm tasked with, working with the HR department and overseeing the HR department, but I'm not a trained educator, right? I'm not in the school buildings. And so that's really what I would like. And I know we're short on time, we'll have to come back to this the next time, but that's really what I would like to know is what is it in the salary administration policy that can be tweaked, right? That can be adjusted or that you have suggestions on that can improve student outcomes. And then the verification of experience process, is there a concern about that? I don't know, right? I don't think we've ever had I don't know that that's ever been mentioned, but I would like to know that. I've heard anecdotally, right? I think you guys have shared multiple anecdotes, right? But I also have heard anecdotally that people come in and they would sit down with HR and HR would say, oh, well, no, you were working, at Walmart, right, as a supervisor or as a trainer, and I'm not gonna give you credit for that Walmart time. And so but then the next person comes in and they're like, oh, you worked at Target, so I'm gonna give you those 5 years. And that matters, right? Like the money that we get impacts our retirement and our daily lives, and it does matter. And so everybody should feel confident that their pay and their compensation is being determined equitably, right? And so the last thing that I'm thinking of, and this is just me, right, brainstorming. This is not, again, I'm not that person who thinks that I have all the answers. This is just kind of start conversation and have those collaborative back and forth. And the last one is the feedback on extra duty and stipend process. And I think we talked about that earlier, so I'm not gonna waste our last few minutes, but I'm happy, I would love to hear any feedback. As I indicated, I think we have 3 minutes left, and so I don't know that we can necessarily get into it, but I think in those 3 minutes, if you could give me some additional things, I'm happy to flesh it out, come up with some things for all of us to react to, right, and get that feedback and move the district forward. So.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Giovanni, for preparing that presentation, and you nailed it. I mean, we're mostly concerned with that Part D of policy 7502, how it's going to get implemented, the verification of experience process. You gave your anecdote about Target and Walmart, and we've definitely given ours. That is kind of what we want laid out in policy to make sure that people are brought on the same, no matter which HR tech they happen to be onboarded with. So you got it right there. We can continue to collect anecdotes, or we can try to come up with stuff about how that process might look. But we were hoping to see what your ideas were for implementing that verification of experience, since it's not laid out in the policy. I guess now I'm gonna need to pass it to Christy. Ms. Patterson. Ms. Vice President Patterson.
Let me ask this, can you all, for the sake of time, you all have some conversations about that, like in between meetings, and give us feedback on that? We can bring that back, because I do want to be responsive to this classified salary schedule that you all proposed, and just maybe show that one slide of your proposal, and then ask you to tune in tomorrow to the board meeting for the other options. So we can go to scenario 3, and I'll turn it over to Jeremy.
So we promised, right, that we would do our homework, and so we spent about 3 weeks or so costing different models of salary schedules, and so so this was one of the scenarios we wanted to be sure to include. So the 25.55 minimum wage that was discussed as something that's a priority for the association. Looking at that compression, right? So in the feedback that we had from the schedules at the last meeting, right? We got some really clear feedback about the compression in those very early salary grades. And so we did clear that out in this sample schedule, and put a 5% differential between those early grades rather than the 1% that was there before. And then we did build in the 2% steps in this model. And then just as you would in any good salary schedule, by raising that bottom floor, right, it was 45.9% lift, right, to the entry level wage, right, in order to construct it in that way. And then it has rippled throughout that model schedule as such. And before actually doing it, I really couldn't predict where the number would land. I thought it could have been higher than that. And it's still a large number. And I think what we recognize, and I think part of the conversation with the board tomorrow, right, is we've got to think about ways to phase in these sorts of improvements, right? And so we know we can't do that at one time, but we can make deliberate efforts to make improvements to the salary schedules that you're looking for, and ease it in as best as we can with our partners at the county, and hopefully our friends in the state start to do some work as well. But like Dr. Lewis said, we'll talk about this a whole lot more at the board meeting tomorrow night. It is on the agenda along with a couple of the other models. And we look forward to hearing your feedback after that presentation.
Thank you for that, and we received these yesterday, and we look forward to looking into them more, and we have a couple follow-up questions we didn't have time to address, but we will send those in email. And our team will look into this further, and we will come back ready to discuss more in depth next time. So yeah, want to make sure we're talking about next steps and kind of sharing out what those are before we wrap here. So I'm going to pass it to Ms. Lopez for that.
So I just wanted to summarize the commitments that we think you guys made and make sure we captured it correctly. So you will ask the board to move the ICE issues to the top of the agenda for tomorrow's meeting. Is that correct? Okay. Okay. Red cards will be available at all school counters and buses when they come back from the printer. You guys will bring a counter proposal on paid bereavement. And then duty-free lunch for our teachers, pay for positions that cover for vacant positions. Yeah.
So I think what we committed to was that we would share best practices around duty-free lunch with principals around the district.
Yeah, that's what they said.
I think also just for clarity on the bereavement, I thought that was like, Mr. Teeter was going to look at costing it and then some additional conversation. I don't believe there was a commitment to that administration was going to recommend bereavement leave. Is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think what we captured is that there was some willingness to explore, look into some of what it would take and bring it back to discuss further, so we can hopefully move it forward to put it into place. A couple other things I just want to make sure we go through, just for the record. So we made clear that staff at all work sites are not fully briefed on the plan for immigration enforcement comes to campus, and we heard you share that the plan has been communicated. And we understand that you're willing to provide letters of proof of enrollment to all students. We would ask you to ensure that is communicated to all stakeholders so they're informed and aware that those letters can be requested. I think that covers it. Anything else I'm missing here? Before I pass it on to Ms. Patterson.
All right, thank you. It's been inspiring to see as many people here tonight. We know you are here because you care deeply about our students and our schools and want these problems addressed. So thank you to everyone. Thank you. We will take 5 minutes to put away the chairs. Please help so we can do that quickly and in a timely manner.
Ms. Patterson, can we
Yes,
just do a handshake just
Yes,
right here?
ma'am.
Because I just
Yes,
don't want
ma'am.
this, if everybody, around the table could just say hello, shake hands.
Yeah, let me finish addressing the audience and we're coming to meet you. Let's please help do this in a timely manner, and then we will hold a quick audience debrief. Okay, audience, we will hold a quick debrief to reflect on tonight's meeting and talk about next steps. So please, move the chairs and tables and stick around for a quick debrief. Thank you.
Ms. Patterson.